So much of the Christian life hinges on this question. Am I living life with an open hand, or do I have clenched, closed fists, cautiously trying to manage my faith? It's easy to follow Jesus when you have conditions. I'll go as long as it's safe. I'll give as long as it makes sense. I'll obey as long as it's comfortable. But rising to surrender means letting go of all the fine print. It means saying, Jesus, you get it all. Even the parts of my life that I still want to control. Today we're going to look at a moment in Jesus' life when in a room of restrained, conservative devotion, one woman rose in extravagant surrender. She gave it all, and her story is found in these first 9 verses of Mark chapter 14. What she does shocked the room, but I'll tell you what, it moved the heart of Jesus. So let's look at it closely now. Mark chapter 14 and verse 1. Now the Passover and the feast of unleavened bread were only 2 days away. And the chief priests and the teachers of the law were looking for some sly way to arrest Jesus and kill him. But not during the feast, they said, or the people may riot. Last week we were in chapter 13, and a chapter many of you found dark, didn't you? You found dark and intense. Well, if the storm clouds seemed to be gathering over Jerusalem last week, I'll tell you what, they have converged and they are right over the head of Jesus. The opposition is no longer looming. It is rising, and it is aimed right at Christ himself. And so from this point in the Gospel of Mark, as we journey on in the coming weeks through and just after Easter, it's going to be totally focused in the coming weeks on the coming crucifixion of the Messiah. So as we come to chapter 14, it's Passover time in the land of Israel. Passover is only one day in the 14th day of the Jewish month of Nisan. The very next day, the 15th day, begins a 7-day feast called the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But in Israel, they lump it all together and they just call it the Passover season, Passover. Now, historians tell us that thousands, hundreds of thousands, upwards of 1 million people flooded into Jerusalem for the festival of Passover. And in fact, it was the dream of every Jew to at least once in their lifetime to be able to celebrate the Passover in Jerusalem. Now, Passover, just to remind you, celebrates God's miraculous deliverance of his people out of centuries of slavery and bondage in Egypt. So every year on the night of Passover, the Jewish people gather around a meal and they all take part. The kids, the grown-ups, everybody takes part in retelling the story of leaving Egypt, leaving those brick kilns of Egypt, and then traveling through the wilderness and to the promised land. Family members each took part, and so there would be a child who would say, "What makes this night different than every other night?" And the father would answer, "On all other nights we eat leavened bread, but on this night we only eat unleavened bread. And on all other nights we eat all kinds of vegetables, but on this night we eat only bitter herbs." Now, as Christians, we're often clueless to what the meaning is behind the Passover. And so we miss out, I believe, on the richness of how Jesus redefined the Passover when he met with his disciples in that upper room in Jerusalem for that Last Supper, what we commemorate each month in communion, the Lord's table. And so that's one of the reasons, the big reason we wrote several years ago, 10 years ago now, The Big Upper Room. That dinner theater that we're going to do now this year, we haven't done it in 3 years, this original drama, and it brings to life this moment and helps us, I hope, to help us understand a little more of the meaning of the Passover and how it definitely shapes what Jesus has done for us. And so it allows us to see it through the lens of Christ. So if you haven't already bought a ticket, I'm telling you what, the space is limited. 4 performances Easter weekend. Stop in the lobby. Those of you online, give a call to the church. We'll get you connected. I want you to be a part of that. If I could spend one evening with you this Easter season, it would be that evening. But notice, Mark tells us, while Jerusalem is filling with thousands of pilgrims ready to celebrate the Passover, the Jewish leaders, the chief priests, the teachers of the law were scheming a secret way to kill Jesus. These are the very people who were entrusted with preparing God's people to receive the Messiah. Instead, they're preparing to silence him. And they weren't just irritated. They weren't just, sort of annoyed. No, they felt threatened, and they were determined to do something to Jesus, to take him out. He had exposed their hypocrisy, he had exposed their money-making scheme in the temple, the racket that they had going, and he had deliberately and publicly challenged their authority. And so their solution was to eliminate him. Quietly, strategically, but permanently. Now think about this. These are the men who are to be leading the nation of Israel, the people of God, in worship and teaching them the Scriptures. And yet these are the very people plotting Jesus' murder. So that's the backdrop. That's what's going on behind the scenes. So let's continue on now. Verse 3. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the house of a man known as Simon the leper. All right, stop there. Taking notes, note this. We're going to get a picture of rising devotion in the verses that come. Rising devotion in, we'll say, a broken place. Bethany was a small village not far from Jerusalem, just a couple miles outside the city. It had become really more or less a place of refuge for Jesus. He would go there because he had friends there, close friends, and he just often stayed there, and these were people who believed in him. He enjoyed spending time with them. This wasn't a palace in Jerusalem. This wasn't a courtyard in the temple. This was a humble home. It was a humble home, and there's a table in the house, it says, of a man who used to be defined by his disease. Notice Simon. It says Simon is called the leper, but that has to refer to his past, because no leper was allowed to host a dinner. No. Simon had been a leper, but he's not a leper anymore. Simon had been healed, and I believe likely by Jesus himself. You get to the end of the Gospel of John, and John says, I've written a bunch of things down, paraphrasing here. I've written a bunch of things down, but the truth is, Jesus did many more things, and if I wrote them all down, all the books in the world wouldn't be able to contain them. So we don't know for sure, but I'm going to say likely that he had been healed by Jesus. Now, there's a beautiful irony going on here, because once living in shame, Simon is now honored by Jesus. Love that. He's got Jesus sitting at his table, reclining with him in fellowship, receiving this powerful act of worship of a meal under his roof. So what used to be a place of isolation has now become a place of intimacy. All right, let's continue. Again, verse 3. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of a man known as Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Now, I asked this in the first service, and I'm just curious, how many of you ladies have a alabaster jar in your purse, in your bag? Any? I know some of you got good-sized bags. I wouldn't be surprised you could have an alabaster jar. Just poking a little fun, all right? Don't get too worked up about that. So alabaster jar. Most of us probably don't have alabaster jars sitting around the house. So I did a little research. Got a picture of one. We'll show you there. Alabaster is similar to marble, only it's softer, really pretty white stone. Found in Egypt, more or less, but throughout the Middle East. It's possible in Israel, but probably imported. It's beautiful. It's perfect. It's very durable. It's perfect for storing expensive ointments or perfumes, those sorts of things back in Jesus' day. And that's what Mark says. Mark says this alabaster jar was filled with very expensive perfume made of pure nard. Now, nard, some of you may not be familiar with that either. Did a little research. Nard is made from a fragrant oil from the spikes, I'm told, on a Nardostachys jatamansi plant. I worked on that, and so I just want you to don't try that at home. Only botanists and prepared pastors can say Nardostachys jatamansi plants, okay? It's found in the Himalayan region of Nepal and India. So the point is, this is expensive stuff. It's imported. Very high quality, Mark says. Pure nard. So jars, alabaster jars filled with this would then be sealed to preserve the fragrance. And once that seal was broken, it couldn't be resealed again. And we'll get to that in a minute. A little more. Verse 4. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. Now, who is this woman that did this? Whose jar is this? Well, Mark doesn't tell us here, but you know what? The Apostle John does over in John chapter 12. Will you learn this woman's name is? Anybody? Mary. Good job. Mary, and not Mary, the earthly mother of Jesus, okay? And not Mary from Magdala, who Jesus cast out 7 demons. Not that Mary. Lots of Marys in the Bible. No, this is Mary of Bethany. Mary of Bethany, who is also the sister of anybody? Martha and Lazarus. Good job. Mary, Martha, Lazarus, some of the closest of friends to Jesus. In fact, John chapter 11 records one of the most miraculous moments in the ministry of Jesus where Lazarus falls deathly ill. And so the sisters send word, "Jesus, come." They beg him, come quickly. Lazarus is deathly ill. And Jesus delays. And so by the time he gets to Bethany, Lazarus has been dead and buried for 4 days. So just when they're grieving and all hope seems to be lost, it's way too late. Jesus makes it clear it's not finished. He walks to the tomb and he commands that the stone be rolled back, and there's protests about that. The body's going to be decomposing, the stench is going to be terrible. He says, roll back the stone. And then the scripture says that he lifted up, with a commanding voice, he says, "Lazarus, come out." And don't you know, the dead man, wrapped still in his burial cloths, comes out alive. So again, picture this. Simon, the ex-leper, is hosting a dinner, and Lazarus, we're told by John, is there, the formerly dead man. They're all sitting around this table in Bethany, living proof that Jesus has power over disease, living proof that Jesus has power over death, living proof that when Jesus shows up, what looks like is final is never the end. See, Simon isn't just a host, and Lazarus isn't just a guest. They are both living, breathing testimonies of the power of Jesus Christ. Every breath they take at the table is a reminder that Jesus doesn't just comfort the grieving, he reverses the grave. So there they are, Simon, the once known guy, once known for his leprosy, and Lazarus, once known for being dead and in a tomb, is with Jesus, who changes everything. And in the middle of this gathering, Mary steps forward. She doesn't say a word, at least that I can find. Doesn't say a word. She doesn't make a speech. Doesn't ask for permission. She simply brings what had to have been her most valuable possession. An alabaster jar full of pure nard, worth nearly a year's, or well, at least a year's wages. Now, this was no casual gesture. This was her treasure. Some think this might have been her dowry. It might have been her inheritance. Definitely her security. But in one bold, breathtaking moment, she breaks the jar and pours it on Jesus. It's an act of extravagant love and total surrender on her behalf. And the room full of former outcasts and miracles. It's just all kinds of tensions and things going on. Mary rises not with words, but with worship. And she gives everything to the one who has given them all a new life. And so despite the ridicule, Mary offers her costly worship of Jesus. And in doing so, I believe she gives us a powerful, compelling picture of what it means for you and me to rise to surrender. John tells us this is where Mary not only anoints Jesus' head, but his feet with that same perfume. And then she dried his feet with her own hair. And gets criticized the whole time for doing so. People ain't happy. It's obvious tension in the room. Mary has just broken her most precious possession. The fragrance had to be filling the air. So is the judgment. The room is filled with critics and cold stares. And they call her worship wasteful. Mark says they rebuked her harshly. They couldn't believe she'd just throw it all away on something so useless. And then Jesus speaks. Verse 6. Leave her alone. Leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The word Jesus uses here for beautiful in the Greek is kalos, and it means something far more than just something that's pretty or attractive. It means something of noble character, something morally excellent, something that, is just spot on, absolutely perfect for this moment. This wasn't spontaneous recklessness. This wasn't empty religious rituals, performance. This was a deliberate act of pure devotion. And Jesus calls it beautiful. So Jesus sees rising beauty in the face of their rising criticism. To see that the disciples saw this as way over the top. What? What does she do? This is embarrassing. What a waste. It's just a complete waste. And John tells us that the traitor Judas was leading the charge. He said, this could have been sold and the money given to the poor. What a joke. And Jesus calls him out on it, right? Well, Judas didn't care for the poor. If he cared about the poor, why didn't he help him yesterday? And he says, the poor you'll always have with you. You can help them anytime you want, but you won't always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare me for my burial. So while the critics were busy calculating the cost, they were missing it. They were missing the beauty unfolding before their eyes. And notice how Jesus flips the narrative. I love this. This isn't a waste. This is worship. This isn't foolish. This is beautiful. Verse 9. I tell you the truth, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. Think about that. Jesus ties her act of surrender to the very proclamation of the gospel itself. In other words, this act of extravagant devotion in the rising beauty in the face of rebuke will echo across the continents and the centuries and be etched into the very storytelling of the old story. So while others are holding back, Mary pours it all out. While others' names will fade into the background, her name, her legacy rises. She didn't preach a sermon. She didn't write a gospel account. But her bold act of love is remembered wherever the gospel is preached, including here today. All right, before we move on, we need to ask the question we always ask. Because this isn't just a history lesson, is it? And this isn't just a dramatic moment of something really special that happened 2,000 years ago. No, this is the living Word of God, speaking to us today with the power to change and shape us today. So on the count of three, let's ask the question together. 1, 2, 3. So what? Right? Thank you. Good job. So what does this mean for us right here, right now? There are three questions I've been wrestling with as I've been standing before this passage all week, just really processing it. And I think these are questions each of us ought to ask because God's Word demands a response. You see, Mary came with something really, truly special, a beautiful alabaster jar of pure nard. It was worth a year's wages. That jar represented her treasure, what she valued most, perhaps, her security and her future. And she broke it on purpose to pour it all out for Jesus. So the question, number one, first question is, what's in your jar? What's in your jar? What is your treasure? What is it that you're holding on to that Jesus might be inviting you to surrender? Is it control? Is it comfort? Is it your image? Is it a dream? Is it some sort of a plan that you've got? A relationship? Is it a habit? Whatever it is, the jar only fulfills its purpose, you understand, when it's broken and open. Worship is not about giving Jesus a little. It's about offering him everything. So what's in your jar? That's the first question. Here's the second. Am I holding back or am I rising to surrender? The contrast in this story couldn't be greater. Mary rises to surrender. She surrenders it all. And the others, they hold back. They're conservative. They're stingy. They criticize. They calculate. You know what? That tension still exists today. Will I rise in surrender or will I retreat and play it safe and protect what I think is mine? So much of the Christian life hinges on this question. Am I living life with an open hand, or do I have clenched, closed fists, cautiously trying to manage my faith? It's easy to follow Jesus when you have conditions. I'll go as long as it's safe. I'll give as long as it makes sense. I'll obey as long as it's comfortable. But rising to surrender means letting go of all the fine print. It means saying, Jesus, you get it all. Even the parts of my life that I still want to control. Here's the third question. What legacy will my worship leave? You know, in a room of people, the only person we're talking about today really is Mary. Not the critics, not those doing the calculating, not even the host so much, but the one who poured it all out. Jesus said, wherever the gospel's preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in her memory. Think about that. Her act of worship is etched into the very story of the gospel recorded in the book. And not because it was loud, not because it was advertised and promoted, but because it was pure. Her worship left a legacy. So, what legacy will your worship leave? Will people see your life and see a life of caution, conservatism? Or will your family remember you as somebody, your friends remember you as somebody who held it back, kept it under control, managed their faith, or someone who rose to give Jesus everything? We've walked through an incredible moment. The Gospel of Mark. One woman's act of surrender pierced the noise of the criticism and the calculation and rose to do something beautiful for Jesus. So what? So it's your turn. Not to break a jar of perfume, but to break open your own heart this morning. So as Pastor Ben comes and sings, we're going to do something a little different this morning. It's okay. We're going to close with a time of reflection and worship. So at the end of the song, that's the end of the service. So if you need to go, go. That's okay. But maybe you need to do some surrendering of your own, and whatever that looks like for you today. Maybe it's releasing something that you've been clinging to. Maybe it's offering Jesus your future. Maybe it's repenting. Or maybe it's simply bowing before Jesus again and saying, you are worthy of it all. You're invited to respond however the Holy Spirit leads you this morning. We've got pillows here at the front. Some of you wondered, what are we doing, taking naps? Or what's up with this? These are for you if you want to come and kneel. You just want to spend some time just before the Lord. This space in the front's open. You may want to walk over to one of the prayer walls and pray over some of the requests and some of the answers to prayer that we've seen. Or you may just want to linger right where you're at and allow this moment to just settle on your heart and your soul. We're in 28 days of prayer, church family. And this moment is part of the journey for us. I want you to embrace it. I don't want you to rush away. Stay as long as you'd like. Let Jesus speak and let our surrender rise.